All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are diving into a massive question, a really huge one, using Ray Dalio's incredible framework. How on earth do entire countries go broke? We're going to break down this powerful, predictable cycle of debt that has, believe it or not, shaped history for centuries. I mean, think about it. It sounds almost impossible, right? A whole country with all of its people, all of its resources, just failing. But it turns out there's a pattern, a kind of template that repeats over and over again throughout history. So let's unpack that. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a handle on the basic cycle of debt. Then we'll zoom out to look at the huge long-term version of it. After that, we'll get into the three predictable stages, what happens when it all comes crashing down, and finally, the big one. We'll try to figure out where we might be in this cycle right now. Okay, let's kick things off with the absolute basics. To really get how an entire economy can get sick, Dalio has this great analogy where he asks you to think of the economy like a human body. And debt, well, debt is like the arteries. And this is the key idea right here. As those debt payments get bigger and bigger, they start to choke off the flow of money through the economy. That means less money for businesses to invest, less money for people to spend. It is literally like plaque building up in your arteries. And if too much builds up, you get the economic equivalent of a massive heart attack. Okay, so this whole boom and bust, it isn't random. Not at all. It actually follows a very long, predictable pattern that Dalio calls the big debt cycle. And listen, we're not talking about your average recession or a normal business cycle here. No, we are talking about a once-in-a-generation, maybe even once-in-a-lifetime kind of shift. This is a fundamental reset that can reshape entire economies and even the world order for decades to come. This quote right here, this is the core, unbreakable rule of the entire thing. You can think of it like economic gravity. You can try to defy it for a while, build these massive towers of debt higher and higher, but sooner or later, reality always pulls you back down to earth. All right, so how does a cycle that lasts, 80 years or more actually play out? Well, Dalio breaks it down into three surprisingly predictable stages that just logically follow one another. You can really see the whole story arc right here. It all starts out healthy in what he calls the sound money stage. That's when borrowing is actually fueling real productive growth. But then it morphs into the debt bubble stage, a total speculative frenzy. And finally, you get to the deleveraging stage. That's the inevitable and often really painful correction. I mean, this is the party phase of the story, where everyone feels like a genius, right? The mood is just euphoric, and it honestly feels like the good times are never going to end. Think of the dot-com boom or the housing market right before 2008. And it's often powered by some amazing new technology that seems to justify these crazy prices. But the whole thing is built on a mountain of borrowing. But you know how it goes. The party can't last forever. And that brings us to the most critical and, the most painful stage of the whole cycle, the deleveraging. And this is the moment everything flips. It's the trigger. The second that lenders start to really worry that they won't get their money back, they all rush for the exits at the same time, trying to sell off their debt for cold, hard cash. This shoves central banks and governments into a really tight corner, forcing them to make a choice that will have massive consequences for everybody. So right here, policymakers hit this massive fork in the road. They've got a choice to make. On the left, you have the ugly path. That's basically doing nothing, which leads to a painful, grinding depression as debts just default and prices collapse. But Dalio says there's another way, the beautiful path. This is all about a skillfully managed recovery. It requires this incredibly delicate balance of letting some debt fail while also printing just enough money to cushion the blow and keep the economic engine from seizing up. Okay, so that's the theory. But what about right now? The billion-dollar question, really, is where are the major economies of the world in this cycle today? Well, this little dashboard here gives us some pretty big clues. Just take a look at these numbers for a second. In Japan, government debt is more than double the size of their entire economy. Now look at that column on the right. Their central bank has basically printed money to buy up debt that's worth 92% of the country's entire annual output. Now contrast that with the US. Debt is high, for sure, but the central bank's direct involvement, much lower so far. This really suggests that Japan is way further along in its deleveraging process. All right, so let's pull all of this together. The biggest takeaway is this. These huge debt cycles, they're an inevitable and predictable part of economic history. But
And this is the important part. The final outcome is not. How leaders manage the crisis, that's everything. By understanding these stages, policymakers actually have the tools to aim for that beautiful deleveraging and hopefully steer clear of a total catastrophe.
Which leaves us with one last and honestly pretty powerful thought. If these cycles are predictable, then who wins and who loses when they turn is also predictable. Understanding this pattern, it's not just some academic exercise. It's about seeing how wealth and power are about to get completely reshuffled. The real question is always who holds the debt and who will be forced to pay for it.